Hello everybody, good morning and welcome to today's session on mastering mistakes in Sage 50 payroll. My name's Alice, I'm going to be delivering and presenting the webinar this morning, and I am also joined by my colleagues Duncan, Louise and Calvin, who are going to be on hand behind the scenes ready to answer your questions. And a little look at what we're going to cover as well. So we'll start with an introduction to mastering mistakes, including examples of what can go wrong and the options that you've got to fix these. We'll then move on to more detail on these options, such as restoring a backup and recovering automatic backups. We'll also cover the rollback option and when to use this, followed by reporting these adjustments and error corrections to HMRC in an FPS adjustment. So when and how to submit this. Afterwards, we've also got a section on adjusting your employees' pay. So this includes things that you might need to consider, like pension payments, nominal link postings and things. And as always, we'll finish with some further support and some remaining time to finish answering your questions. So first thing we're going to take a look at in the introduction are some examples of what can go wrong, if I can get my words out. There's definitely more things than this that can go wrong than what I've got here, but just some kind of common mistakes that people do tend to need to correct in payroll. It's important to know as well, mistakes happen, nobody's perfect, so this webinar should help just to give you a bit of confidence to know what to do and how to fix certain situations. So some examples, you might have over or underpaid some people's payments, things like underpaid bonus or overpaid commission. You might have some statutory payment errors where you've entered the wrong dates and you need to fix the amount as it was too much or too little. Maybe you've processed payroll on the wrong pay date due to the process date being incorrect, or even processed an employee on the wrong NI category or tax code. Maybe they've had a change that wasn't noticed until too late. And you could have also had like a mistake with pensions as well. Maybe someone's on the wrong scheme, they've got the wrong pension settings, and you need to correct that for them. So as I said, there's definitely more that can go wrong than this, but just a few common scenarios. And we are going to look at options of ways that you can put them right. So two main options for this. First one is going to be correcting the error in your next pay run. So let's say you've had a small under or overpayment for an employee. You might choose to adjust the next payment that you give them to accommodate for that mistake. Doing it this way means that no payroll history has changed, and that correction is going to be carried forward into the next period and done there. Now, this also means you don't have to do any manual adjustments, and you won't need to submit any adjustments to HMRC either. But you will, of course, have to wait a little bit longer, as this mistake's instead corrected in the next pay run. Or the other approach you've got, which we will be focusing on today in this webinar, is to reprocess your payroll. So this will involve going back to the original period where the mistake happened and entering the corrected pay values. And one important thing to bear in mind here though, if you did need to reprocess any other pay periods, so if you went back a couple of pay periods, for example, you would need to reprocess each pay period between the mistake date and your current pay date, just to make sure you bring your payroll records back up to date again. And once you've completed the correction, you will also need to submit the FPS adjustment to HMRC, which we'll cover a little bit later. And of course, adjusting your employees' net payments and perhaps other things like HMRC payments as well. So if you do decide to go back and reprocess, as this often is the best option to do, there are a few things to consider. So before the correction, you need to make sure that you've got the original information. So this is things like the original payslip for the employee, the P32 report as well, if you've made the payment to HMRC, the record of any pension payments that you've made, or nominal link transactions that have been posted as well. And this is just to help make sure that you can compare those to the new ones and know if there's any changes or more adjustments needed to be made. You also need to consider what you've done since. So this could be more payment periods that you've processed, different pay frequencies, etc. Because bear in mind, if you have gone back in time to reprocess and iron out a mistake, you will have to process the payroll back up to date again. And this could be for one employee few employees, or all of your employees. It really does depend on what mistake you're correcting and which method that you use to correct it. And speaking of correcting it, you do need to think about how you're going to make that correction. So are you going to restore or recover a backup? Or are you going to use the rollback wizard? Now, whichever of these that you use, you'll just need to then set your process date back correctly to the pay date you need to correct, amend any information you need, and then of course reprocess again. And as I said, you will do that for each period from the pay date that you went back to. So once you've made that correction, afterwards, you'll need to adjust your employees' pay, adjust the HMRC payments, submit the adjustments to HMRC in your FPS adjustment, and think about other things as well, like pension adjustments. And throughout this webinar, we will touch on as much of this as we can, starting with restoring a backup. So for those of you who've seen our webinars before, you know we always advise that you take backups of your data, and you are prompted to at certain points during the pay run. But this means that you've got your data backed up, so should it ever get damaged, corrupted or lost, you've got that little safety net there. You can take your own backups via the backup wizard, so when you're prompted to by payroll, or also whenever you would like, so you can just go to File and Backup. And these backups taken by you can be restored into payroll. Or alternatively, you can recover an automatic backup taken by payroll. And these automatic backups are taken as you update the records. And when you restore or recover a backup, what that's going to do is overwrite any existing data with the backups data. So anything you've done in payroll since that backup was taken would need to be reprocessed. Obviously, get yourself back up to date again, as you've essentially taken a step back in time. And when to use these options as well. So you might restore a backup for recent mistakes, if you've just updated the records maybe and realised that you forgot to add a certain payment. And these options are also better suited to mistakes which affect all or most of your employees, since it overwrites that payroll data with the backup data. And it'll allow you to go back to a certain point in time and pick up from that point for all employees. So just to reiterate that, the restore or recover option, it will affect all of your employees. And I will be showing this in a demo shortly, but an important thing to note with this is that when you are restoring a backup and you're in the restore wizard, you do have the option to select the file types that you would like to restore as well. So depending on what you select in here, the backup that's restored will overwrite these file types. Now, ordinarily, it will just be the data files only that need to be restored to fix a mistake. Data files, it's most things that you'll need really, so your basic data, your payments, your company information and things too. You've also got RTI files though, so this is your FPS and real-time information data. But this should only be used in specific circumstances if you're instructed by our support team, for example. And the reason why you don't normally restore RTI files or FPS data is because if you did, and then you corrected your mistake, payroll no longer knows that that original FPS was already sent. So because that RTI data has been overwritten with past data, and as a result, it will allow you to send another full FPS. And what that's going to do is essentially duplicate your liabilities and figures to HMRC for the pay period. And it could actually result in HMRC expecting you to ultimately pay a much higher liability than you're meant to, which I'm assuming nobody wants to do. So, moral of the story, if you're restoring a backup, very important to only select data files unless you're otherwise instructed. And as far as the other files in that kind of selection there, they aren't used very often. Generally, these are only used if you're moving your data to a new location, like a new computer, or as I said, if you're instructed by one of my colleagues on the support team to do so. So let's go into a demo. We'll take a closer look at this restore option. I'm just going to turn my camera off and we'll bring up payroll. So I've got my company here, it's a monthly payroll. And as we can see, so last updated date and last FPS date is the 31st of July. So I have completed my July pay run. But on closer inspection, we've looked at the reports and we've realised we've actually made an error and we've missed off a payment for everyone. So it's kind of like a half-year bonus that my company gives, and we've missed that off for everyone. Now, since this affects all of my employees and it's a recent mistake, in this scenario, I've decided that I'm going to restore a backup from last month and then reprocess July's pay run with that extra payment added. And this restore route will allow me to go back in time, correct those payments, reproduce my pre-update reports and things as well, and then of course update the records again. Now, when I do payroll, I do tend to take a backup at the point of updating records anyway, as I know all of my payments and things are entered. But I also take one once I've completed my payroll. And feel free to take more than this. It's always better to be safe than sorry. But that way I've got a pre-update and a post-update backup should I ever need to restore any of those. And just to show you how I save those as well, so little example of the backups I've got for this company. So this is how I do mine. We can see I've labelled them by pay date. So I've got April, May, June, July. And I also label them as post or pre-update as well. So this just means that my backups are easily identifiable. I've got them all in one place. So should anything go wrong and I need them, I know exactly which one I need to restore. So in my case, this most recent pre-update backup is the one I need, so 31st of July. This is going to restore the payroll data to before I updated the records for July. So it means the payments are all still entered, but I'll be able to go in and add that extra payment and then re-update payroll. And I can't restore it straight from here. Instead, this file needs to be restored in the Restore wizard. So let's go back to payroll, and I can find that by going to File and Restore. This then brings up the Restore wizard. The first page has got some recent backups that have been taken. Bear in mind as well, this is for different companies and things as well, so just keep an eye on that company name. If the one you need's here, select that there, but if not, just click Next. This next page is where it's important to check that you've only got data files selected, of course, unless you've been told otherwise. So I'll click Next again. Now we can browse to that backup file, as we know exactly where it is and what it's called as well. So it's my backups folder, and it's the most recent pre-update one that I'm going to need. I'll open that up, and to finish the Restore wizard, I'm just going to click Next and Finish. You will be prompted to enter your password as well, just an extra little security step there. And that will log in as normal with that backup restored. So the Restore wizard, it's told payroll that we want to overwrite the data files from the moment in time that that backup was taken. And we can see it's also changed my last updated date to June, the month before, as we are now in prior to July's records being updated. But also notice that my last FPS date, this is still showing as July, and that's exactly what I want. So I don't need to send another full FPS. I'll only need to send an FPS adjustment once all of the corrections that I've done are completed. So after restoring this backup, I would need to reprocess the employees correctly this time. So I would highlight everyone. I would go to enter payments as normal. Let's just ignore that message for now. I would enter everybody's payments, check I've added on that extra bonus for them. And then I would just continue with my pre-update tasks as normal. So pre-update reports, new pay slips for the employees. If I need to upload those pay slips as well, feel free to do that. And then it would be a case of updating the records. Now, I'm not going to reprocess everything in any detail just yet. I will be doing that a little bit later, but I just wanted to show you the kind of process of restoring a backup. Just a reminder, that was File and Restore. Now I am going to quickly just restore my payroll back to where I was at the beginning of this demo. I do want to show you another option. So if you do need to go back and correct a mistake, you do also have the Recover option. And that's another way of getting back to a pre-update stage. And remember the recover wizard, that's a way of going back to an automatic backup that the payroll's taken as you were about to update the records. And you'll get to that by going to File and Recover. And it does prompt you to take a backup at this point. Now I do already have one, so I'm just going to click Next. And you then get a list of all of the different kind of timestamps of when the payroll's been updated. So any periods that have been updated, you've got the tax month, the processing period, you've got the pay date or the process date, pay frequency, so I've got M for monthly, and as well the date and time that that backup was created. So mine are a little bit all over the shop with preparing for this webinar, but it would be a case of selecting the one you need, clicking Next, and having a little look at this information. So notice it does mention that you need to reprocess the payroll up to date again, reprint your relevant reports and things, and then of course you would just click Finish. So the recover option is great if you can't find the backup that you need or you forgot to take one. And it's just a way of recovering your data from an automatic backup and allows you to go back in time to make that correction. And same as the restore option, once the recovery of that data is done, it would change my last updated date depending on the date that I'd selected in here, and I would then be able to go and make my corrections. So that is how to restore or recover. And those options are more suitable for mistakes that affect all or most of your employees. And remember as well to only restore data files unless you've been instructed otherwise, or if you're restoring your payroll onto a new computer or something. So we'll next look at the rollback option. So this is a different way of kind of going back in time. It is different to restoring or recovering. So rather than overwriting all of the payroll data for your employees, the rollback option instead removes the payment history for one or more selected employees. So only the employees that you've included in the rollback will have their payment history removed. And as you can see on that screenshot there as well, you can choose the payment period that you want to roll back to and then reprocess from there. And this is best to use for mistakes that affect one or a few employees when you need to reprocess any earlier periods and maybe you don't have a backup available. And the beauty of a rollback is that when it comes to correcting the mistakes, as I said, you only need to correct and reprocess the people that you included in the rollback. But with that, do bear in mind, you are only able to reproduce the pre-update reports for any employees that you roll back as well, as everyone else will remain completely up to date. And a little tip as well, so if you do need to roll back to a previous tax year, you first need to roll back the current tax year. So take a backup if you dated it first, use the rollback wizard to roll back the current tax year, move your process date back into a previous tax year, and then you can roll back again to the period that you need, and then obviously begin your reprocessing from there. But let's dive straight back into a demo. We'll take a look at the rollback option. I do have a couple of scenarios I would like to show you. So the first scenario is an employee of mine who's been on statutory maternity pay, or SMP, and they're returning to work a little bit earlier than expected. So I originally processed this employee in July purely just on SMP, but I need to go back, amend their return to work date, which will reduce the SMP, and then I need to pay them salary for the days that they did end up working once they were back. And a little top tip from me, before you reprocess anything, I did mention this before, but make sure you've got the original information of what's been paid to hand, like the pay slip for the employee and the P32 as well for the HMRC payment. And if you don't have the pay slip, you do actually have an option of reprinting pay slips from the payroll links section. So let's say I just wanted to get June's pay slip again for them. I would pop in my June process date. I do already have one favorited, but you've got the different options there of reproducing the payslip if you need. And that just means you've got that original figure to compare to once you've made the correction. So once you're ready to do the rollback, you're going to highlight the employee. Very important to only highlight the person that you want to make the changes to. And you're going to go to tasks and rollback just about halfway down. This is the rollback employee wizard. So again, it does prompt you to take a backup. So if you don't have one, definitely take one. And you've also got a little bit more information about the rollback process as well. I'm going to click next, and I'm just going to confirm that this is the correct employee that I'd like to roll back. If it's wrong, of course, just cancel the process and then reselect the employees correctly. I'm going to click next. And this is when you're going to be able to select the earliest period that you want to remove. Now notice it says all updates with a later date will also be removed. So let's say you roll back to May, for example, you would need to then reprocess May, June and July to get back up to date again. Now in this case, I am only going to be rolling back the last period that I updated, which is July. So I'll select that most recent one. I'll click next and click finish. And that's that process complete. So now that the rollback is complete, I can see that this employee's last updated date has gone back to the 30th of June. So this allows me to get back to the pre-update stage in July for them. But also everyone else's has remained exactly the same. So this is the only employee who I would now need to reprocess for July. And that's probably the main benefit of a rollback, I would say. So I'm going to make the amendments I need to their SMP. I just need to go into their record. I'm going to go to absence and SMP. And because they're returning earlier than expected, I actually just need to amend this return to work date. And once I save this, it's actually going to affect the amount of SMP that they're getting. So they're currently now only due 1 week. And I'll click OK and save that. And I am, before I go to enter payments, I am just going to check their salary as well. So they are a salary worker. And I just want to make sure they've got that information in the record too. Great. And once you've rolled back, it is also super important just to check your process date. This does need to be the date of the payment period that you're reprocessing. So I'm just going to double check mine set to the 31st of July again. And from there, I'm good to go and go and enter payments. So I can see this employee's salary in there, but this is actually for a full month. So I need to just do a quick adjustment, and I'm just going to actually pay them for the days that they've worked this month. Of course, this will be different for you. It does depend on what you pay your staff, but that's the salary adjusted for them. And I'm also just going to check in the summary tab as well. So I've got that newly reduced salary there, about £1,500. And I've got that 1 week of SMP as well. So that's been reduced because we changed that return to work date. And with those changes in mind, we can see the payroll's now calculated their net pay. And this is what the employee should have originally been paid for July. But with that adjustment done for them, it would now just be a case of reproducing any pre-update reports that I might need, including a new payslip as well. So we'll go in there and I'm just going to produce the standard laser payslip. And this just allows us to compare the new payslip's net pay with the original one. And we can see the differences with other things as well, like employer pension. And if you do want to keep an eye on the year-to-dates and things as well, it just gives you that information. Print any other pre-update reports that you might need as well. And once you've done that, it'll be a case of updating the records again for them, just to bring them back up to date. And that's the point where you would take your pre-update back up as well. So we can see now the last updated date for this employee after the rollback and those changes, it's back up to date 31st of July. So payroll side, this employee is all sorted, but I do still need to do some adjustments. I need to adjust the pay that I'd sent across to HMRC. I also need to send the FPS adjustment. And then of course actually accommodate the differences to their pay as well, maybe paying the difference to them. So before I do that, I do have another employee that I need to make changes to. So we just saw a rollback for one period, but I do have another employee. I do need to make amendments to them, and for this scenario, I need to go back for a few months. So I need to go back a few months and fix those changes. So employee number 3, I'm just going to open up their record. This employee actually hit state retirement age a few months ago, so their birthday was end of May. And if I just click save to show you, I was getting messages to tell me to change the NI category, but for whatever reason, I hadn't. So actually, when I look at the history tab, this employee for the last 3 months, they've been processed on the wrong NI category, so it should have been changed to C. So what I'm going to do is roll back this employee for those months where the NI category was incorrect. And same as before, make sure you've got any of the original payslips and original reports that you might need prior to rolling back. Highlight the employee, and then you're going to go to tasks and roll back. And same again, take a backup when you're prompted to, then click next. Make sure you've got the right person highlighted and click next again. And then this page is where it's going to be a little bit different to last time. So we are going back a few periods now. I'm going to go back to May, when the employee's birthday was. So select that May period there. And I'm just going to click next and finish. Nice and quick, process complete. And that's the rollback done. So I'm going to now open up this employee's record. I'm going to go to the employment tab, and I'm just going to change their NI category to C. Click save and just close the record. So that's the NI category changed, and I just need to reprocess with that correct category. So notice we're back in April. That's what the last updated date was. I'm going to change my process date to my May date, because that's when I need to begin reprocessing from. I'm also going to go into enter payments. Now I don't actually need to manually change any of the pay. I just need payroll to calculate their pay with the new NI category. So we can see their salary there is normal, that all looks fine, but NI contributions for the employee is showing as 0, and that's because of that new category. So as a result, their net pay has increased. So nothing else to change here. Just need to move on. I just need to get my pre-update reports for May, any other reports that I might need, and then I would update the records for May. And because we're doing multiple periods, I would then move on to June. So change my process date to June. Again, we'll go back to enter payments. We'll just double check. So yep, salary's there. NI contributions are 0. Pre-update reports and things. And then update the records for June. And then the last period that I need to reprocess is July. So change my process date. Pop back to enter payments. Again, see that change there, so that's all correct. Grab my new payslip and reports, and then the final update records to get them back up to date again. Great, so if we look at the last updated date, we're now all back up to date again for this employee. And if I just open up their record and go to the history tab, I can see now those reprocessed periods now with the correct national insurance category, and also with that increased net pay as well. So that's my corrections done, and a little demo of the rollback feature as well for one period and then for multiple periods as well. So we chose how to roll back. We used the wizard to choose the period that we wanted to go back to, and then reprocessed from there. And this option is better for mistakes that only affect one or a small number of employees, and everyone else is just left untouched. So yeah, those amendments are done, our payroll records are correct, and it's now going to be a case of reporting these changes to HMRC using an FPS adjustment. Now the FPS adjustment, this does look very similar to a normal FPS, except that this submission shows the difference between the original FPS values and the corrected values. So it won't send across all of the same figures again, but it will send over those adjustments that we've made. It's also only submitted once all of the amendments are made and your payroll is up to date again. So in the demo I've just showed where I went back and reprocessed from May, multiple periods, I would actually only be able to send the FPS adjustment for July, and I wouldn't be able to send it for May or June. And also just to note, if you're correcting more than one period, the liability adjustment on the submission itself, it only shows the differences for the most recent period, but the submission itself will reflect all of the changes we made in those previous months as well. It's kind of like year-to-date values. So let's go back to the demo. We'll get that FPS adjustment submitted. And we did have 2 employees with amendments, so employee number 3 and 4. I could send them separately, but probably more common just to send that together and save a little bit of time. So I've got those employees highlighted, and you'll find the FPS adjustment just from your payroll tasks, just underneath full payment submission. Now notice as well, if I accidentally clicked on full payment submission, you would actually get this message and you wouldn't be able to send it. And that's because it already has been once sent. And you don't want to be doubling up your figures to HMRC. So I'm instead going to click full payment submission adjustment. And just bear in mind, you might get a late notice as well. So if you are sending it after your pay date, you'll be asked to give a reason why it's late. But otherwise, it brings up the submission window. Looks very similar to a full payment submission. We'll click continue, check over these details here, and click submit. And this is showing me the 2 employees that we've made changes to. It shows me what adjustment I'm sending across as well. So we've got the employees' details, and then it's just going to be a case of clicking submit. So this will show you the liability adjustment, whether it's positive or negative. It'll just help to give you a bit of an understanding of any changes. Of course, yours will kind of go across with the loading bar. Mine is just a simulation, so it's submitted very quickly, but we can see that that's successfully been sent across to HMRC, and that means you've reported those changes to them as well. Last FPS date doesn't change, of course, that just remains the same. But that is your FPS adjustment, and that's sent to report any changes to HMRC in the periods that have already been reported on the normal FPS. And just a reminder, if you are changing multiple periods, you do only need to send one FPS adjustment once all of those changes are made and you're back up to date again. And now that that's done, we'll move on to the last section of the webinar, which is going to be adjusting your employees' pay and some other adjustments that you might need to do as well. So in most cases, there are changes to the employees' net pay, either higher or lower, but of course there is also other things like HMRC payments, pension payments, etc. So for changes to net pay, it is a good idea to compare the old payslip with the new payslip just to see the difference. Here I've got screenshots of payslips from the employee where we amended their return to work date for the statutory maternity pay. So I've got that old payslip at the top, net pay £811.09, but we've got that new payslip at the bottom, £1,463.51. take one from the other, and I can work out how much more I need to pay the employee as a result of these corrections. And there are a few options of how to pay them as well. So you can do outside of payroll, or if you want it to be included on the next payslip, you could actually use a post-tax, post-NI payment to pay that for them in the next period. Or as well, if it's kind of gone the other way and you've got an overpayment, you can actually arrange to make deductions from your employee. Or same again, if you want to put it through the payroll, you can agree a deduction amount to take after tax and NI until that's paid back. For HMRC payments, similar thing, you would check the original P32 report, which shows what you originally paid to HMRC, against the new P32 report for the payment periods that you've corrected. You would compare the total amounts due on line 21, and if you owe HMRC money, you would add that onto your next payment. Or if you've paid too much, you would deduct that from your next payment. Now that is generally how it's done, but if you do have any questions regarding amendments to what you've paid HMRC, it will be HMRC themselves that you can contact for any further advice or support. And another thing to bear in mind as well are the recovery values for things like statutory maternity or paternity pay. So if the corrections you've made have affected those amounts recovered on the P32, you will need to submit a new EPS, or employer payment summary, to report those changes. And that does bring us on to the next slide actually. So first thing, a few other things that you need to amend, first one being the EPS. So as I said, if those statutory payments recovered have been affected by the corrections that you've made, you will just need to submit another EPS, which will have those updated year-to-date values for HMRC. For pension payments, a lot of variety with this one, as there is multiple ways to submit or upload your pension information. I would advise comparing any original pension information that you've got from reports that you might have versus the current pension information after the corrections, and then contact your pension provider for advice on how to submit any differences that there might be in the contributions. I know that a few providers you can manually amend the contributions on the pension provider portal, but again, not 100%. Every provider could be different, so definitely check with them. And then last but not least, any of you who are using Nominal Link to post over to accounts, if you reprocessed an earlier period, you will be prompted to send those postings again. But obviously that kind of doubles up for the employee what you've posted. So again, a few options with this one. You can either post them again and then reverse the original journals in accounts, or you can post them to file and make manual adjustments to the existing postings that are already in accounts. But it might be worth checking how your company would prefer to do this, but of course you do have those different options. If you don't repost them, you will likely get a bit of a warning message in payroll just to say that you've got incomplete postings, because since you've gone kind of back in time, payroll doesn't know that they were already posted. But that's just another few adjustments just to bear in mind if you do a restore or a recover. And that does bring us to the end of today's webinar on mastering mistakes. So we've covered quite a lot of things like restoring backups, recovering automatic backups, the rollback option, and of course reprocessing, and the FPS adjustment and things as well. So still a few minutes left to download the handouts as well, if you would like a copy of the slides in the presentation that we've covered. And of course, you will get an email with a recording of this webinar as well. Feel free to watch that back. So if you want to rewatch any of the demos, and if you'd like to cover any of it again, you absolutely can. But before I wrap up from my end, I do want to just go over some further support with you as well, starting with the webinars that are coming up in the next month or so. So we've got a lot of webinars coming up on things like online payslips, starters and leavers, the HMRC secure mailbox. We've also got what's new in 30.2 as well. So this is a closer look at the new payroll update, how to get it installed, and some of the new features and improvements that are in it as well. But lots coming up, so be sure to register for those. Either click that link in the handout or go to sage.co.uk/webinars. We've also got the Sage Help Centre, so this is where you can search the knowledge base, you can access support guides, there's demonstration videos and recordings of all of our webinars as well. And should you need to get in touch, you can contact the experts as well. And lastly, we do have Sage University as well. So this allows you to set up a free account and access e-learning and bite-sized learning, as well as earning product certification for these as well. So that's sageu.com, and it's a great way to expand your knowledge on Sage 50 Payroll or other Sage products as well. But as I said, that has brought us to the end of the webinar. So if you are leaving us now, remember you can download the handouts until we end the session, and feel free to copy and paste the Q&A as well if you'd like to keep any of those questions answers for future reference. And then last ask from me, there is a short survey that you'll get as you exit the webinar. If you've got just a moment to fill that out, we would all really appreciate that. The feedback goes a long way, and we'd just like to make sure that these webinars are the best that they can be. But I can still see quite a few questions coming in the questions panel. So I'm going to go on mute for a few moments just to help with those last remaining questions, and I'll be back in a few minutes to wrap things up. So I'll be back in a few minutes. Hello again, everyone. Thank you so much for your questions. That does look like we've answered most of them now. I think there's just the last answers going out. So that does bring us to the end. So keep an eye on your emails for a recording of the webinar coming through, probably in the next hour or two. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully we'll see you on another webinar very soon. So on behalf of me, Duncan, Calvin and Louise, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.